What's going on, guys? It's Illuminostic. Welcome to my Grateful Dead stream. It's the days between when Jerry Garcia was born. I don't need those right now, actually. Jerry Garcia was born on August 1st and died on the 9th. And if you're a student of numerology, then you know that is incredibly poignant. That's exactly what a great magician would do, come in on the 1st and leave on the 9th. And a magician, in the sense of the word that I use it, is like a shaman, or even more succinctly, it's like a person that toes the line of consciousness, that is there to raise the human race up from the vantage point that it's at, whatever that happens to be. And Jerry actually said this once, that their goal was hopefully to take the human race forward a couple of steps and have some fun while we're doing it. And so, it became obvious to me very, very quickly after finding the music of the Grateful Dead that that's actually what they were doing. And of course, the impact of the band is multifaceted. They revolutionized performance in terms of the sound. Hum canceling microphones were invented by people connected to the Grateful Dead. Let's see what else. Active pickups for Phil Lesh's bass. There's a whole ton of monitors. You couldn't really use stage monitors until the Grateful Dead invented the hum canceling microphone. And originally it was a very simple kind of basic contraption that just had like two mics that were out of phase with each other, so it canceled the 60 cycle hum. And they actually did that because of the wall of sound, which was 2 stories tall. I think the bass speakers were 2 stories tall, and it was like 50,000 watts. It caused brownouts in 2 towns, or 3 towns, 2 or 3 towns when they plugged it in, which means that the power went down in the entire town. So, really just an extraordinary thing. And if you just summarize it as, jug band takes LSD, makes $1 billion and changes the world, it just sounds stupid. But it's the actual true story of the Grateful Dead. They started out as Mother McCree's Uptown Jug Champions, and there were kazoos and washtub bass and all that sort of thing. And if you listen to the recording, even the really old recordings, they are already kind of the Grateful Dead. The announcer is like super square, 1950s cartoon sounding kind of cracker ass person, talking through his nose and just totally 50s, vibe. And he's like, yeah, the next one's Mother McCree's Uptown Jug Champions. They play these really weird long things, but people seem to really like them. And at the end of the recording, they're interviewing Garcia, and he actually totally unironically says, it's not like we want to get famous or be worshipped or travel around from city to city and have people following us or whatever, which is incredible because that's exactly what happened. And this was like 1963, well before there was any indication that would actually occur. Just checking. Okay, so let me know if there's echo on the mic, you guys. That was a problem the other night. Because people just are popping on and then leaving immediately. So I'm just wondering if there's something wrong with the audio, or am I just ugly or something? I don't understand what's happening here. Yeah, so the Jug Band ended up eventually hiring NASA. Not hiring NASA, but buying surplus parts from the space shuttle in order to, they made their speakers in the sound system they created in the late 80s with the material from the outside of the space shuttle. And the wiring was all surplus from the space shuttle. And they actually engineered or integrated a piece of equipment used by NASA to detect the vibrations of stars that could measure how far away they are, because it was so able to detect those super subtle vibrations. And so it was used to tune every seat in a football stadium so that each and every spot is exactly the same as it is down the floor. And I actually, excuse me, tested this once. I was on the floor at Dead and Company, not Dead and Company. The last shows the Grateful Dead did as the Grateful Dead after Jerry died, the 50th anniversary. I was down on the floor for the first night, and I went all the way up to the very highest part of the rim of the stadium just to see if it was actually the same. And the reality is that it was exactly identically the same. And so most of you guys probably know the Grateful Dead started out in 1963 as the Mother McCree's Uptown Jug Champions. And they did their first gig as the Grateful Dead in 1965 at one of King Kesey's acid tests. King Kesey was basically a jock that was selected for CIA testing. And this is part of where the conspiracy theorists get the idea that the Grateful Dead was somehow a psyop or that it was an MK Ultra project, and it definitely wasn't. I mean, it's just dumb. Garcia was nothing if not sincere, and I was lucky enough to get to know a lot of the inner circle and even one of the band members when I lived in California, and his sons a little bit. And there's just no way that it was some dirty trick. It's not true. Those people are just. The influence of the Christian right is unfortunate because they have people thinking a lot of stupid shit, really, at the end of the day. But anyways, so King Kesey he was exposed to LSD because of the CIA, and then he was working in a nut house, and he started taking, or a mental hospital. I'm sure it's not PC to call it a nut house nowadays, right? So he was working in a mental hospital, and he started taking LSD and going to work to talk to the schizophrenics and all of the other types of lunatics, mentally ill people that were in the mental hospital. And of course, that was probably extraordinary because, contrary to popular misconception, I think it's getting better. But for a long time, people actually called psychedelics psychotomimetic drugs because it was believed that they mimic psychosis, and they don't really exactly. The similarity, I think, actually comes from the fact that schizophrenic people actually have damaged filtration system, right? So you guys hit the like button, please, while I'm thinking about it. Share, like. You can support the channel by the various methods in the chat if you feel so inclined. Schizophrenics have different parts of the filters down. There's different types of schizophrenics, and so it manifests differently. And then I think certain types of schizophrenia are the product of like trauma, and the filters are down, because some people are paranoid and violent, other schizophrenics aren't. And then anthropologists, and actually more specifically, psychologists. I don't know how to put this. I know it's a thing though. There are anthropologists that are also psychologists. It's like psychological anthropology, I think. Pretty sure that's what they call it. Studied shamans, and they actually came up with a name for this type of schizophrenia, essential schizophrenia, where it's different and they have some control over it and can navigate it, but they report a lot of the same things, the same type of experiences that schizophrenics do. And so just putting that out there to explain that, in a sense, the value of King Kesey going in there and talking to these mental patients while he was tripping on LSD was that he was able to more or less step into their world. When I read about this, I actually did it myself. I went downtown and found a schizophrenic guy that was kind of crazy and talking to himself. And I struck up a conversation, got right in there with him. My girlfriend was watching, and it was amazing to navigate that terrain with him. So anyways, King Kesey was very impressed with LSD. Also, Robert Hunter, who was Jerry Garcia's writing partner, was part of those same CIA experiments because they lived in the same area. And so Kesey thought, well, it would probably be good to give this to normal people, as many of them as we can, because the people of the United States are, in some kind of coma. They're racist and they're nationalistic and they're boring and they're just watching television all the time. And I don't know if you guys have seen this, but a video just surfaced where they slowed down the frames that they were playing in the U.S. on televisions every single night at the end of the news broadcast. And as the letters fade, if you slow it way down, you can see them transform into trust the government. There is a God. The government is God. It's nuts. And it's actually supposed to be the lyrics to the Star Spangled Banner, but they're like shifting to this other message as they're going by. imperceptibly, but the subconscious picks it up, right? So, you know what I mean? He wanted to undo that. He wanted to reverse that. And as the situation progressed and there was more and more civil unrest and there was war that no one agreed with, and there was more and more motivation. So eventually Kesey started renting buildings, and he had already met the Grateful Dead, who already knew Owsley. And Owsley Augustus Stanley III was already wealthy when he was born. He inherited a ton of money, and he met up with a girl. He had a girlfriend who was a chemist, and she knew how to make LSD. So she started teaching him to make LSD. Thing is, our friend Owsley was also into alchemy and Freemasonry and the occult and all of this kind of stuff. And LSD had allowed him to access capacities of consciousness that, and there's an interview on YouTube. I'll try to put a link to it in the comments that I recently found with Owsley talking about this. And the question actually posed to him was, the orange sunshine LSD that you guys made was 99.99% pure. What was that about? And he explained that it's about alchemy and the necessity of maintaining a certain type of consciousness when you're making the LSD, and having a clear intention and imbuing all of that. And if you have impurities in the product, then they interfere with the integration of the intention and the will of the magician that is being imbued into the LSD. And so Owsley was thinking way beyond the parameters of most people ever, much less in the late 50s, right? I mean, you guys have to try to imagine that it's 1959, 1960, 1962, whatever, at the latest, before the Grateful Dead actually really got rolling. You know what America was like to some extent, right? This first wave of people to, as they put it, turn on. I believe that phrase was popularized by Timothy Leary. A lot of people don't really realize that the phrase wasn't actually just tune in, turn on, drop out. It was tune in, turn on, drop out, take over. And that last little bit of the phrase is absolutely key. But at any rate, trying to imagine what it was like to turn on for the first time in a world where everyone was straight and square and normal, except for like a handful of black guys that did heroin and smoked pot, It just must have been like, suddenly you're awake and you're literally, one of 100 people. Everyone else is just walking around sleepwalking. It must have really just been trippy, to say the least, right? So Owsley starts making the LSD, and I'm not sure when exactly this happened, but at some point the Grateful Dead moved into his basement, I guess, or he rented them a house. He paid for everything. Owsley paid for their food, he paid for their equipment, and he paid all the bills, but he also had them on a carnivore diet, so they weren't allowed to eat anything but meat and milk, red meat and milk, that's it. Eventually they would deviate from that diet a little bit because their tour roster said that they wanted lobster and filet mignon every night, and that was it. The no vegetables, none of that bullshit. According to Owsley, vegetables are poisonous. Ironically, Owsley died because he went to Australia because he knew the pole shift was coming, right? And it's happening, apparently. The polarity of the Earth is changing, and that could cause it to flip over. And so when that happens, oceans will rise, and there'll be all this chaos. And he figured that Australia would be the safe place to be. And because God is wicked and has a sense of humor, he flipped over. He hit a bump and flipped his truck and landed in a mud puddle and drowned. So you get it? He ended up upside down and drowning anyways, even though he flew away to Australia to try to get away from it. Thank you, entry-level employee. Yeah, it's just too crazy. You can't make this shit up. I actually went to his wake, which was in a Masonic temple, right above Bob Weir's club, and that was surreal too. We went in, and the high-level Masons of Marin. Marin is one of the most expensive places in the world, real estate and all that. A cardboard box in the gutter is like $1.5 million. So. Very powerful people, I'm assuming, and we were all going in to do the wake for Owsley as they were coming out, and they had like a day glow projector set up in the room in the temple, and they say they're not an occult organization. Eventually, I actually did take initiation, so I know, from my own experience as well. But at the time, I knew better, and the bookcase was just full of books on magic and the occult. So I busted them lying on that count about the Freemasons not being an occult organization. They definitely are. I don't know I think I might be getting a sore throat, so you got to excuse me. I'm struggling a little bit here. So, I don't know when exactly the Grateful Dead moved in with Owsley, but it was before 1965 when the acid test happened. Garcia said there was so much crystal LSD in the house that it had gotten into the vents, and it was just like floating around in the air, sparkling in the sunlight. There would be like smudges of it on the refrigerator. The bathtub was like literally full at one point, and they were consuming quantities of LSD that would break most people on nearly a daily basis. In fact, one of the roadies for the Grateful Dead actually came forward and said that Phil Lesh actually took LSD at every Grateful Dead concert that ever happened, which mean when they did 3-night runs, 5-night runs, he was doubling the dose every night. And I don't blame him one little bit. There's nothing like playing music high on LSD. And so Owsley had anticipated this, and it's a little known fact that the Grateful Dead was actually Owsley's idea, not the name of the band. The name of the band came to Garcia when he was smoking DMT and reading the encyclopedia, which is, of course he would be doing that, because what else would he be doing? And the letters Grateful Dead, or the words, floated up out of the dictionary and hovered in front of his face, and everyone hated it. And, it's just for later in this story, but not the name, but the concept. And he would tell them, this is my hand. This is Jerry, this is Billy, this is, Pigpen and Bobby. Remember that Bob Weir was also like 14 or something at this point, 14 or 15. 15 when the Grateful Dead actually started touring. So I guess he was 15 in 1965. What a life that guy's had, huh? He's still filling football stadiums, and he's been literally in the Grateful Dead his entire adult life. And also, it's kind of young to be taking these half cup doses of pure liquid LSD all the time. It did actually mess him up a little bit too. He kind of got too out there for a while. Garcia actually fired him for 6 months. But at any rate, basically the thing was that Owsley was making them do is that they had to practice all the time. He would pay for everything, buy their equipment, buy their meals, but they could only eat almost raw red meat and drink milk. And they had to take LSD all the time in insane quantities and practice 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, at least, all the time. And then gig all the time. Their first gig at Magoo's Pizza Parlor was, all day long. And then they would come home, and Owsley would, Phil's like, man, I'm tired. He would be like, fuck you, get in the basement and practice. And they're literally, like, when they talk about him, they're still terrified of him to this day. They said, they couldn't figure out if he was God or the devil or both. And Garcia actually considered him a guru. And if you've ever watched an interview with Jerry Garcia, you understand the scope and depth of that guy's intelligence. It's incredible to think that anyone could have been a guru to him. And there are pictures of him walking with Owsley through airports, and you can tell he's in deference. You know what I mean? He's in a submissive, his body language, which you never ever see from Jerry Garcia. Never. No one could tell him what to do. 2 of his wives got thrown out of the house because they asked him if he was sober or not. Divorced on the spot. Don't ask me shit. You know what I mean? That's how he was. Nobody really knows him. Nobody knew him. That's another interesting thing to note. Nobody really knew him. Nobody really hung out with him. Nobody knows anything. He just, after a certain point in like the mid 70s, he kind of shut himself off, and nobody knows what the fuck he was doing, and what was really going through his head. He's one of the most mysterious people ever. But at any rate, super intelligent. In fact, around this period when he was in high school with Hunter, I guess a few years earlier, Robert Hunter, and that's how they met, by the way. They were in high school together, and I've always thought that, that says a lot about the possibility that fate is involved, because, like, what are the chances that that guy, the only person that could write the words that come out of Jerry Garcia's mouth, where it was, he already knew that guy. How the fuck did he already know him? It just, what in the hell, man? Like, they were hatched from the same cosmic egg. But if you know anything about James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, then you understand why it is so ridiculous to hear them say that they would, in their spare time at age 15, they would riff on Finnegan's Wake. Finnegan's Wake is a book written in 72 languages with polyglot and portmanteau words that starts in the middle of the last sentence. So it makes a complete circle, and it kind of follows the Kabbalistic tree of life. There are layers and layers and layers to the potential meanings. The title, Finn Again, is even a reference to that. And you can't tell if it's the new Aeon is changing, or if it's actual character named Finnegan, or if he's dying and waking up, or dying and going into the afterlife, or reincarnating, or you know what I mean? It's not exactly clear what's happening. There's just all these layers of possibilities. And so when you read a word, the first syllable might mean something in Spanish, and also in Latin, and also in Quechua. I mean, Quechua, you know, the people where I live, the language they speak, is actually one of the languages that's integrated into this book. And so you can unfold every syllable and then connect that syllable in different languages to the next syllable and the next syllable that can all be interpreted in different languages. And so in this way, you can extrapolate all of these other sentences and paragraphs and meanings from the book. I mean, it's the most complicated thing that a human has ever created, in the opinion of a lot of people. And it also has like all these historical references, and you know, it is completely insane. By the way, Illuminatus trilogy by Robert Anton Wilson. Timothy Leary knows all this, and he said that Illuminatus trilogy was more important than Finnegan's Wake. And if you understand the Wake, that should have you reading Illuminatus trilogy post haste, because what the actual fuck. So anyways, that's how smart these guys were. That at 15 years old, they're chewing through Finnegan's Wake somehow. I mean, they didn't have the internet. They couldn't Google stuff, you know. It's just mind-boggling. Actually, in my Patreon, I posted an interview where Hunter actually explains the song Franklin's Tower. And one of his rules has always been that he does not talk about the meaning of the lyrics to Grateful Dead songs ever. It's the only time he made an exception, because someone really famous, like a Rolling Stones writer or something, said that the Grateful Dead lyrics had no meaning, and you know, they were just pointless songs. And so he actually explains in this article in my Patreon, join my Patreon, secret streams and whatnot. He explains Franklin's Tower, and it gives you an idea of how his mind works, and it's absolutely incredible. The level of genius that, and also just the knowledge that he's drawing on of just everything, you know, how bells are made and the technical terms and all these historical references that, you know, you basically have to be an encyclopedia to understand all of the meaning. And part of my theory is that one of the reasons the Grateful Dead becomes so powerful when you take LSD is that you're more collected to the collective consciousness, the existence of which has been proven, by the way. If you didn't watch my Michael Levin, on morphology, the last live stream I did, go watch it. At least watch the part where Michael Levin talks, because a field of intelligence that determines morphology, the development of organisms and development of cells, has been proven now. So it's no longer some acid head's crazy idea. It's definitely a real thing. So where am I went off on a bit of a tangent there. One of the reasons that LSD, people connect so much more with the music is that the layers and layers of information in the music and the lyrics, you actually have access to that collective more. You may not consciously be realizing it, but on some level, you're actually absorbing all of this stuff, even though you don't really know it. So where are we at with this story here? So, Owsley's giving them shit tons of LSD, paying all the bills. They're called the Warlocks, which was also the name of ZZ Top at the time. They didn't know that. And so one day Phil was at the record store and he saw a CD by a band called the Warlocks, and he came home and he said, "You guys, we can't call ourselves the Warlocks. There's already a major label band that has that name." So Garcia said, "Well, pass me that DMT pipe and an encyclopedia." And he starts smoking the DMT and reading the encyclopedia, and the words Grateful Dead levitate up out of it. And Grateful Dead motif, there are stories with this motif of a person who has died and a stranger's coming along, and there are variations of it. So, one of them is where the stranger finds the person and they don't have any money to be buried, or another one is that they have a debt that has to be paid and they can't be buried, just variations. And so the stranger will give his last couple of, gold pieces or whatever to have the stranger buried, and then later on a ghost will show up, or a person they don't realize is a ghost, and it will take them to treasure or save them from some kind of trouble. What the hell was that? The ghost of Jerry Garcia somewhere? That was odd. All right, so where are we at with the story here? Okay, so that was the motif of the Grateful Dead. Sorry, I had insomnia last night, so I'm a little bit wonky. And then, so they hate the name, everyone but Garcia, and they go to the acid tests and they play their first gig as the Grateful Dead. And I actually was able to obtain all of the existing video of the acid tests. There's video of Owsley putting the crystal LSD in these big giant barrels, and they're mixing the Kool-Aid in. And, that's why it's always so funny to me. People are like, talking about the Kool-Aid and the cults. Well, this Kool-Aid was a whole different thing. And so everyone took ridiculously high doses, and there were people like hanging naked from the rafters, brushing their hair straight up in the air, like looking in mirrors and just brushing their hair straight up, like just all intense. And they had the Merry Pranksters band playing in one corner, and they didn't have really good lighting effects back then, so they just put some Jello in a box and put it in front of a projector and changed the colors and wiggled the Jello around, and that was their lighting. And so the Grateful Dead are playing on one side, and the Merry Prankster band simultaneously. So there's just all this cacophony and lunacy. There are Hell's Angels everywhere dancing around out of their minds. There's a really great video of Kesey before the third one. I think he's walking down the street, and the reporters come up to him, and they're like, 1950s, like maybe kind of derp too. They have it like, well, the guy's got kind of an accent, and he's like, so are you going to tell what's bad about LSD at these acid tests? And Kesey's like, you guys should come. He says, not exactly. You guys should come. I don't think they did. But the thing is, you have to remember, LSD wasn't illegal yet. So these events, there was no paranoia. They could openly, advertise that they're taking LSD and pouring it into these giant buckets, and no one could do anything. The cops couldn't stop them. No one could arrest them. So they continued doing this until LSD was outlawed. And actually, Zane, who is King Kesey's son, that I met, it was really extraordinary to meet him, because he was driving a replica of the Further bus, and I was the second person to show up at this Fish concert. So I pull up to the Further bus, get out, and I'm like, what the fuck? What is this doing here? And then King Kesey walks out, and he's standing right in front of me, and then I'm like, wait a minute, King Kesey is dead. And I was confused as hell, because he looked so much like him. And then I looked at his shirt, and there was a picture of Ken, and I looked back up, and I was like, is that your dad? And he's like, yeah. I mean, come on. And one of Garcia's daughters was in there with him, so I got to meet Annabelle then, and I bought it was a DVD of all of the existing footage of the acid test from Kesey's son, which felt like an extra honor or something to get it from the family like that. Yeah, and so what the Grateful Dead discovered at the acid test is that they could come out of their bodies, that consciousness was a unified field, and that our experience of it as separate, an individual ego, an absurdly narrow vantage point from which to view the universe. Not sure who I stole that from, probably Terence McKenna, but that they could suspend that sense of separateness. And they went so far as to say that, even at their bigger concerts later, when they would have like 100,000 people out in the audience, that they could dislodge themselves from their bodies and go and watch the music from out in the audience, from someone else's body. And I had literally heard old deadheads tell me, like, I swear to God, man, one time Jerry was like in me watching the show, and people are like, whatever, man, you got way too high. And then I heard Garcia say that they actually did that. I wouldn't put it beyond him to say that just to like mess with the people that he knew thought that was happening. But I honestly don't think so. I believe him. I mean, they've all said it. I actually got to look Phil dead in the eyes and ask him about this one time. We'll get to that story. But, you know, aside from being able to actually, you know, inhabit the bodies of other people, you know, they said they would do this routinely on the stage, that they would slip into, Bobby would trade bodies with Phil, and then they would play each other's instruments and stuff. Might explain why sometimes Garcia's didn't sound like he knew what he was doing. So, but more importantly than, you know, that sort of thing, they'd figured out that there is a collective mind, a collective, you know, field that we could enter into. And they discovered that when we accessed this collective mind, it was a transcendental space, that we were, they were able to do things that they could not normally do. The collective improvisations are what made the Grateful Dead great. Don't get me wrong, Jerry Garcia is a very good guitar player. It's very, very difficult to play his best stuff. It's not difficult in the same way that Yngwie Malmsteen is difficult, but it's very, very difficult. It's very chromatic. He was probably the most chromatic rock guitar player, and for those of you that don't know what that means, it's, you know, you hear him doing this all the time. Right, that 4 notes in a row. That kind of sound. So that chromaticism. Why the hell are we talking about chromaticism? The point of it is that they could access that collective mind, and then the improvisations that would happen would transcend the abilities of the individuals in the band. And the thing I noticed about it very early on is that when that happened, there were 2 things that are really important. These improvisations are off the cuff, right? They're not like Fish has like tricks that they have planned, and then they pretend it's improvisation, but it's not really. It's like stunt rock. So the Grateful Dead would have, you know, like 7 people improvising on the stage, and they would go into spaces where it was completely improvisational. There was absolutely no plan. There was a chord that would float up. If the bass player added an outside tone underneath one of the chords, they would shift the entire key all of a sudden. Everyone had to be completely on their toes and aware. Bob Weir knew. Jimmy Herring, who is an A-list jazz and fusion player, said that Bob Weir had the greatest knowledge and ability to imply chord vocabulary and theory of anyone he'd ever worked with. And coming from a 50-year A-list jazz fusion guy, that's a crazy thing to say about somebody. I mean, it's a fucking crazy thing to say. So, you know, they had to have the ability and the knowledge to access all of this information. It's not a cheat code. You know, you don't just get super high on LSD and then access telepathy and the music just creates itself. In a sense, that happens when you get into flow state, but you have to do the training as well. You know, it's like Kung Fu or anything else. Like, it is conscious and it's also not conscious. And the real point, though, is that these collective improvisations, when that real magic happened and erupted out of the band, oftentimes it would be programmatic, which is where there's an image that's being made in the music. There's a really famous piece where there's a Corvette driving along. But this is what the music is supposed to be creating, right? Corvette driving along, slams on the brakes, wind blows, this guy's toupee flies off. And you can hear it. Like, it actually is, you know, I had to be told what exactly it was, but, you know, you're right away like, oh, okay, yeah, see that totally. But the Grateful Dead would do things like, you know, during the bird song improvisations, that melody already kind of sounds like a bird a little bit, right? So they would, you know, make the bird out of notes, and it would fly around and it would sail in the wind and it would do loops, and they had to be so in tune to really create this effect and get it going. And the greatest one that I ever heard, Sam Boyd Silverdome, Las Vegas, Nevada, 1992. The bird's flying around and it comes to roost on a perch. And then the best that I can explain it, it's like there's a ball, the bird becomes a ball, and it rolls down this ramp that's a spiral, and it goes faster and faster and faster. And the ramp is made out of spiraling keyboard notes in the whole tone scale. And then it's the same, they use it for cartoons for falling and stuff too. But a looping spiral going down, and then there's a ramp, and there's a moment of silence when the ball hits the end of the ramp, So it like, and then there's a moment of silence, and Garcia or Weir uses a harmonic like here to catch it, and then bends it, and the effect is that it's like the ball got caught in a elastic net, and it stretches, and then the melody like melts out of this image. And the thing is this: normally shit like that has to be carefully composed. You can't improvise a picture that is that coherent and intricate and with that super high degree of specificity. And it's actually so mind-blowing that and in order to evaluate this stuff, right, they had to pay them because in the 80s and 90s, outside of the Grateful Dead community, the Grateful Dead were considered an absolute joke by everyone else on Earth. These people are just high. Their fans are just imagining that they're good. It didn't help that they were off quite often for a lot of their career. So people would give you a chance and they would go and see it, and then it was dumb, and it was like the Special Olympics of rock and roll, and it just reinforced people's beliefs. But the reality is that you're actually using more of your brain when you take psychedelics, and that there is a collective mind that you can access. What I was saying, I apologize for being so spotty here, but earlier I was talking about Michael Levine and his team's work. It might be Levin, I don't know, but on morphology, and his theory is called mind everywhere, and it's basically a really, really sophisticated form of panpsychism. And so they have proven that not only if skin cells, for example, are taken out of their environment so that they are not affected by other influences, they will actually start creating living organisms out of dense skill. There's no brain, there's no neurons. You guys got to watch the video. It's insane. But also they can manipulate the electrical ion paths of that worm that lives forever so that it grows two heads. It does not alter the genome, but ancestors of this two-headed worm also have two heads. DNA has been dethroned. There is some kind of field that communicates through electromagnetic energy, because of course it does. That's why our brains are loaded with magnetite. And so this has been a very roundabout and unfocused way of explaining that the field that the Grateful Dead have been telling us about all these years, that they would tap into in order to do these extraordinary, impossible improvisations. Oh, that's what it was. They had a bunch of straight world music scholars and composers and people from well, yeah, I mean, that stuff that you're naming is not psychedelic rock. It's not really even, I mean, those are precursors to blues, but I would say the Dead did invent psychedelic rock single-handedly. I mean, this type where you're accessing the collective mind and improv, there's no other like rock band that was doing that. Not this well anyways. I mean, Cream would do it kind of, but nobody was doing it on the level that the Dead were. Nobody has to this day. That's another crazy thing about it. There has not been another one. There hasn't. Fish, when they're confronted, like, people say you're the next Grateful Dead, they're like, no, there will never be another Grateful Dead. And remember, they're all Juilliard graduates, or at least two of them are. But anyway, so they got a bunch of straight minds from the Berkeley and Juilliard and shit, and they had them listen to peak Grateful Dead chosen by the band. And then they had, like, this conference in Oakland in the Bay Area. Sorry, the sore throat is making it increasingly difficult for me to push through here. And also, I feel like I'm not quite as focused as I could be. So, at any rate, they had them listen to peak material with no background in any of it. And so one of the guys that was asked to evaluate, basically they were asked to listen to it and then summarize. One of them said, there's no way this is improvised. That's it. It's a trick. They're tricking you. And I don't think they had all the information, because if you take into consideration that the Grateful Dead never played the same concert twice, except for once in 1981 and again in 91. So what I mean by that is that there are different songs in different orders, or at least the songs are in different orders through their whole 30 years. And, you know, like I said, only one repeat. And then they would play every song differently every time. So, you know, those differences might be a little bit minor, like... Right? They might play it like... Yeah, that part, like... Or whatever, you know, it's still the same song, but they would do that to those songs every single fucking time. How do you play Truckin' 344 times and play it differently every single time and not run out of ideas? They literally didn't run out of ideas, you know. So, but when that guy said that they're faking this, it's a stunt. They're tricking you, and you know that's because he could not accept that it was real. And I think that says everything almost that needs to be said. Good night, you guys. Really, you know what I mean? Like, what the hell? But I don't think he knew that they did that they played different songs all the time, and that they, you know, so that what he was accusing them of is going back and like scoring out all of these improvs and shit. Like, it's just stupid. It's just no possibility. Another one said that the rhythms, the reason that people don't perceive it without LSD is not that they're high and imagining things. It's that the normal consciousness of people doesn't quite have the subtlety. It's rounding things up and off and down to perceive it the way it is. So, you know, he said, like, this music has rhythms that we have no way to write. And, you know, there's aspects of it and things that happen that we don't have any way to communicate on paper anyways. And another one of them said, you know, and they were asked to summarize. One of their summaries was basically the 5 greatest musicians in the history of humanity were in alphabetical order, he said. And I don't remember them all, but he was like Bach, Beethoven, you know, whoever, Mozart, the Grateful Dead, and somebody else. And so, you know, these are Juilliard and Berkeley people. And that was really the beginning of mainstream acceptance that, you know, deadheads weren't high in imagining shit, that there was actually something extraordinary going on here. And I think it really, and this is why, you know, when I wrote that they're the single most important thing that ever happened, of course you could say, well, like the Big Bang or whatever happened then, and, you know, there's other stuff. But in our modern history, there isn't anything. I mean, Joseph Campbell, the great Harvard mythologist, I guess. I mean, he mostly studied myths. I don't think that was his actual title, but, you know, Joseph Campbell, you know, he somehow became aware of the Grateful Dead, and he went to see them, even though he's, you know, a Harvard intellectual. He's not some hippie. And later he was asked about it, and he said that he had seen natural magic twice in his career, once in the jungles of Borneo and the other times at Grateful Dead concerts. So that's a pretty remarkable thing to hear from someone of that caliber. There's actually an interview with Garcia and Joseph Campbell together somehow that you can watch on YouTube. I definitely recommend that. But what I'm saying is that the distribution of psychedelics, it's said that Owsley made most of the LSD that people consumed in the 1960s and 1970s. And if it wasn't him, it was his disciples. It was... actually, this guy that made Orange Sunshine died. Tim Scully's partner, I can't remember his name. But the guy that made Orange Sunshines wasn't Owsley, but Tim Scully taught him, and Tim Scully was taught by Owsley. So, you know, the DEA says there's only like 7 LSD chemists operating in the United States at a time. They almost never catch them. And when people get caught with large quantities, they never rat. So they're super mysterious, and... you know, the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, if you guys haven't heard of that, it's like the super secret, powerful, kind of like white hat Illuminati, heavily involved in the LSD distribution. They have fleets of boats and yachts and shit. It's the BET, the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. At any rate, Owsley was making most of the LSD that people were consuming, at least in the beginning. And the Grateful Dead were the distribution network. You know, people don't really ask the question, how did the Grateful Dead manage to have the most advanced speaker system in the world that was, you know, 2 stories tall and, you know, 40,000 speakers and the bass customized so that the strings could come out of different areas, like individually. You know what I mean? All these innovations, and how did they do that without a single hit? They didn't have a single top 10 hit until 1987. So how are they doing this? I mean, I'm not going to say it, but I'm sure you guys have figured it out. It wasn't album sales. Sure wasn't album sales driving that monster. And so, yeah. And aside from that, if, I don't know if any of you guys were around in the 1970s and 1980s, but progressively that spark of psychedelic light that entered into the cultural mind, the cultural awareness, the cultural consciousness, and exploded, was snuffed. It was largely extinguished by the Babylon power structure and the Hollywood and the crappy corporate music, Yeah, I mean, you guys know what happened. And as time went on, from the late 70s to the 80s were just completely shallow, coked out, hairspray, fake music made with, I mean, I know a lot of people like electronic music now, but I still think it's vapid and soulless and probably not even good for you. But the disco era, you guys get my point. Everything was shallow, hollow, vapid, soulless. And the light got sucked out of popular culture. But there was the Grateful Dead the whole time, carrying this torch through that mass of degradation and dilapidation and the dissolution of the spirit of America. They were the only thing keeping that torch alive. And it is incredibly poetic and almost impossible, the timing that Garcia left, because it's as if as soon as humanity had received enough of the energy from this band, they had absorbed it and they had started to go on and create their own things. People don't think about this, but the whole jam band festival scene is what created the music festival scene in the United States as well. That wouldn't be a thing. That happened when the Grateful Dead exploded. Right, all these jam band festivals blew up everywhere, and then those developed into more diverse festivals, and so all that shit grew out of the Grateful Dead, the entire culture, and these places and spaces where people have been able to come and experience this kind of consciousness. Now with bands like Tool, I actually got to talk to Danny Carey about this like 20 years ago now, or no, 10, 15, 13 ye's ago. That video's on the channel, although it's super cringy. I need to remake it because it's a great story, but I was new at this, and the photo quality's bad and the audio's bad, and I think feeling a bit self-conscious about telling such a crazy story, so I don't like my vibes at all, and the whole thing. Anyways, but the story is absolutely true, and I discussed this with him about, like, there's this energy that you and the Grateful Dead, Fish, a couple others put off. Like, what the fuck is it? Basically, was the question that I posed to Danny Carey, and his answer was exactly what I've already said. I mean, it's not that hard to understand that there are filters in our nervous system that restrict the amount of incoming signals to something manageable, and when you're tapping into that energy, you're tapping into that same field that regulates morphology that we thought DNA was in charge of, but it turns out that there is some kind of field. Where exactly the information is still an interesting question. Is it true that the universe is a hologram and that all of the information is enfolded into every part of it? There's a lot of really interesting videos coming out on this channel in the near future. You guys should definitely share and support me. We don't, we need support in order to put, for example, I'm working on a video about the numbers 3, 6, and 9 inspired by Tesla. But as I got going down the rabbit hole, I realized, like, man, there is a lot here, and it's not woo. I'm making sure I actually understand the math, and it's going to be intricate and tedious, and it's taking forever. And since I'm demonetized, I get a few hundred views on the video. I mean, if you guys don't support me, then I get nothing for this crazy amount of time I'm investing. So I'm trusting you guys to make it worth it. Otherwise I'll have to stop, and that'll suck. But yeah, there's a bunch of really crazy stuff on deck for this channel coming up. Sadly, you end up with Dave Matthews. Yeah, actually, it's funny that you mentioned him because I grew up in Fairfax, Virginia, and my uncle was from the same town as Dave Matthews. So when I was like 7 years old or something, well before he was famous, they had a barbecue And my dad and all his friends were bikers, and they were dangerous bikers. I mean, real bikers. Why don't I get disciples to make videos for you? I don't have disciples. I don't know what you mean. I definitely don't play that game at all. I'm just a guy, you know, doing my thing. Disciples, where would I get disciples from? Anyways, I would never expect anyone to do something for nothing for me anyways. But yeah, Dave Matthews came and played with his weird singing style and shit, and they all pegged him with beer bottles and chased him down the driveway and out of the property. So that was my first encounter with Dave Matthews. It was actually at my uncle's ranch before he was famous. But yeah, I agree. He was great before the commercialization, but that's the music for the whitest of white people, and I'm not into it. But yeah, so the bullet point of that presentation is that, thank you, Mr. Something Else, is that the psychedelic, renaissance would not be happening now if it wasn't for the Grateful Dead. There's absolutely no fucking way. It would have been snuffed out. And I don't understand entirely, and neither did Jerry Garcia, how it is that they didn't kill him. He said that up until at least 1974, they were always expecting to get off a plane and just get gunned down, have bullets rain down and destroy them all. But for some reason it was tolerated, and so the LSD didn't ever completely vanish. And it's not just that, though. This idea that you could connect to some kind of higher consciousness, that you could experience gnosis, that you could experience a collective mind, and that although it's not guaranteed that people will become nice and good after that experience, it's very, very likely. And so it certainly helps a tremendous amount for people to experience this. Yeah, I mean, I would hope you missed something important. I've been talking for quite a while already. I think about an hour. If I haven't said anything important yet, then I've wasted a lot of people's times. Where were we at with the story, though? I mean, as far as the story goes, there's not really that much else to say. They got better and better and better for a long time, and then Pigpen died, and then everyone got really high, and Jerry got too high and died, eventually, from also being really fat and eating a lot of bullshit and smoking too many cigarettes. Yeah, that part of the story is too bad. It's a real shame. How Garcia went out, but I don't think, that I would ask him to do anything any differently. I think he probably did exactly what he needed to do in order to be what he was. A lot of people will say things like, why don't you do it without the drugs? And I say, well, then go to the moon without a rocket ship. I mean, soggy mids, what's up? That's just not how things work. Psychedelics are technology, and we have evolutionary adaptations that we have developed that filter out a lot of the information and the energies that are potentially contributing to our experience and our creations. And we have to short circuit that in order to access these higher potentials. It's just how it is. Yeah, and I mean, Garcia's drug addiction, like everyone else, can definitely be traced back to trauma. His mom maybe was a narcissist or something. Like, she didn't really seem to care about him very much. But she must have been, I don't know, like he was very open emotionally in a way, and very sincere and joyful and playful. So somebody was a positive influence at some point. But his dad drowned right in front of him when he was 4. And whether or not he saw it is disputed. His brother Tiff says he didn't see it. Garcia always maintained that he did watch his father drown in a river in Northern California. But either way, he did lose his father at the age of 4, and his mom abandoned him to his grandparents. abandoned him to his grandparents, and that may be one of the driving elements, the main one, that he really wanted to create a gigantic family. And it is, really probably one of the most tragic elements is that no longer exists, especially now that Dead and Company is no longer touring. I do not feel like that music had the spirit that Jared did when Jerry was there. In fact, Pythagoras would agree with me. I was just doing some research into isomorphs, and I was thinking about symmetry and synchronicity, and it occurred to me that there must be such a thing as isomorphic resonance. And so I punched it into Google, and sure enough, isomorphic resonance was a concept that Pythagoras presented to his secret society, wherein waves imparted order to the chaotic energy of the primordial stew via symmetry, because the oscillations are symmetrical. And there's big ones and smaller ones, basically. And tied into that theory somewhere, he was talking about there must have been something like a Jerry Garcia back then, because he's talking about how the same musician can play the same music to the T, exactly the same, and it doesn't have nearly the power to transform than another person might. And that is really, I think, one of the hardest things for people that never saw Garcia to really fathom and understand, that it's not about notes. It's not just about beats. There's something so much deeper and weirder than that, that is just, I think a lot of people fail to perceive it because they don't believe that it's possible. They don't think it's real, that, some people just have some sort of ability to tap into, some sort of energy and actually amplify and transmit that energy. Yeah, well, don't worry. I think I'm getting sick, which is unfortunate because we're moving tomorrow. But I did a very similar stream years ago that you can check out on the channel, where I was probably a lot more coherent. I wanted to play a few songs, but we have people sleeping below us, and they're probably even pissed off that I'm still talking. Do you guys see the demon? Oh yeah, the purple demon that appears when I play sometimes. So yeah, you guys, I mean, that's really the thing. I mean, I've already said it, and there's not really too much more to say about that. If it wasn't for the Dead, the psychedelic renaissance round 2 would not happen. It would not be happening. And there would be no hope. I mean, I know it sounds crazy to put that on a band, but I really do feel like if it wasn't for the Grateful Dead keeping that energy alive, it would have died. I mean, there was nothing else out there that was carrying it like that. And I don't understand it. I really don't. I don't understand why it's so uncommon. It seems like a basic fundamental aspect of a human being to be connected to that realm of things and to desire those kind of transcendental experiences and that kind of connection on that level. I mean, I guess you could say rave culture might have done something, but it's not on. We needed something on that scale. The purple Gnostic. We needed something on that scale to carry that energy in that way. And the moment that it was possible for us to continue on without him, Jerry dropped dead. I mean, that's exactly how it happened. And if you look at the set list of that last concert, where, hell, we could probably actually listen to it, I bet. You guys want to listen to Jerry's last performance? This song is particularly important because, or interesting, I mean, because one of the rules was that, you know, they didn't address the kind of rumors that the dead could control the weather, and that sort of thing. You know, is Jerry Garcia something other than a regular human being, and all these kind of crazy questions. They didn't want to talk about that. But in this song, So Many Roads, Garcia actually addressed it directly, finally. Oh, no. Probably going to lose the camera for a second. Here, we don't need it. Let's do screen capture. Yeah, okay, no, I'm gone. I can pull this out, put this in. By the way, you guys, we do appreciate support via PayPal and Zelle, all that kind of stuff. So what are we looking for? We're looking for... Yeah, so this song, he actually addresses it all. He says, thought I heard a jug band playing from over on the side of the hill, far side of the hill. If you don't, who else will? And that seemed to be true. He was, and a lot of times Hunter seemed to be writing to him. In Fire on the Mountain, he says, you're here alone, there's no one to compete. And that also seemed true. But anyways, in this song, he says, I thought I heard a jug band playing. If you don't, who else will? From over on the far side of the hill. And then later he says, the wind don't blow and the rain don't fall and you no longer hear me when I call, which sounds to me like a reference to the weather no longer responding and the fact that the audience had become very disconnected. MTV had polluted the scene. There were riots and violence and all of this kind of thing. So I think you guys should have audio. This is from the last show.
Thought I heard a blackbird sing up on Bluebird Hill. Call me a wine boy, if you will. Gone when the sun don't shine and I don't deny my name. Got no place to go, ain't that a shame? But I heard that Kesey whistle, moaning sweet and low. But I heard that Kesey when she blow. Down where the sun don't shine, underneath the Kokomo. Whining boy got no place to go. Many roads I tell you, so many roads I know. So many roads, so many roads. Mountain high, river wide, so many roads to ride. So many roads, so many roads. the hill. Oh, I know the sun don't shine and the rain refuses to fall. You don't seem to hear me when I call. Wind inside and the wind outside, tangled in the window blind. Tell me why you treat me so unkind. Now where the sun don't shine, I'm lonely and I call your name. No place left to go, ain't that a shame? So many roads, I tell you. All I want is one to take me home from the high road to the road. So many roads I know, so many roads, so many roads. From the land of the midnight sun, where the ice blue roses grow, along those roads of gold and silver snow, howling wide or mowing low, so many roads I rode, so many roads to ease my soul, so many roads to ease my soul. So many roads to ease my soul. my soul. So many roads, so many roads, so many roads. So many roads leads my soul. many roads to ease my soul. So many roads to ease my soul. Lord, so many roads to ease my soul. So many roads. I've been down the road. Lord, I've been walking that road. So many roads. Many roads to ease my soul.
Oh man, that was pretty sad. Pretty sad stuff. I remember actually one of the craziest synchronicities, and it was really because it was nested in a bunch of other synchronicities, but we were on our way to see Tool at Red Rocks, and this car had like a license plate of 666 THX, which is also 666 in gematria, and it was a silver Mercury Mountaineer. Aleister Crowley was a Mountaineer, and his order was the Silver Star, and his planet was Mercury, and the odometer read 0. It was 1414141414. I don't know where the decimal was, but that's a like important number in Freemasonry and shit. I mean, it was so obvious that when we got to the Tool concert, people were walking by and they're like, well, did you buy that car on purpose? Like the Crowley Mobile, did you do that on purpose? And there was, that was already a big theme at the time. And so I get in, and Mr. Crowley, of course, is playing on the radio. And then we're driving up to Red Rocks, and we put on a random collection of Grateful Dead. And hold on, let me bring my camera back, I guess. Boop. Well, or actually, let's leave the screen capture on. Yeah, well, whatever. You guys don't need to see me anymore. I guess my webcam turned off. I don't know. Anyways, so what was I saying? Okay, so we're driving up there, and we listened to that, and it actually brought me to tears. I'd never heard it before, and because I knew it was the last show, and I said, and that's the last we'll ever see, or that's the last we saw of him. And we turned the corner, and there was this like blinding fucking rainbow. Like it was one of the most supernatural looking things I've ever seen in my life, just coming up out of the desert. And of course, you guys know that like the thumbnail that I have is the double rainbow from the Santa Cruz shows, the 50th anniversary shows. The first night there was a double rainbow above the stage, and everyone has always associated Garcia's spirit with the rainbow. So when that happened, that was insane, man. We were all watching the band do their 50th anniversary final shows, and then this double rainbow forms right behind the stage. And it was just really insane. It's really insane. And so, so we turned the corner, and I said that, and then we saw that rainbow. I was like, man, that's just, the builder of the Rainbow Bridge, suppose. So do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. You guys want to... I was thinking, I don't know if I should tell you guys more stories about, my interactions with some of those guys, or Phil. Hey, what's happening? Why is that coming back? Oh, there's so much of a lag that I'm actually 10 full minutes behind you guys. Wow. That's crazy. My video is 10 minutes behind you. I don't know if I should tell you some more stories, or, I feel like we got through the Grateful Dead thing. Just completely insane. By the time they arrived in the 90s, they were using surplus from the space shuttle to build their sound system. They put $11 million into research and development alone. For a sound system. That's completely insane. And that's why, if you listen to Dead shows from 89 and 90, when they had that thing together, there's nothing sounds like that. The sound is just beyond incredible. Actually, here, let's see if I can find this New Year's countdown, man. This is crazy, because the Grateful Dead usually didn't have, like, big theatrics. I don't know if I'll be able to find it so easily, but I don't know. I don't know if I can just like find that. Oh, maybe this is it. Yeah, this is probably it, actually. is this? What is this? So now the audience is still pretty big. Anyways, I've asked you guys to hit the like button and share and like and subscribe and send millions of dollars to the options for support there. Let's see, 10:30. Yeah, I should probably shut it down, you guys. I kind of don't want to, but I feel like I'm getting sick and I have to move tomorrow, so I better just go get some rest. Thank you guys all so much for supporting and spending this time with me. And if you need, help navigating the Grateful Dead's ridiculously massive catalog, because it's not all amazing, I can help you out with that. So join our Discord, join our Patreon, and I'll see you guys again soon.